Something, almost imperceptible, is happening to you right now. Something you can't quite put your finger on. You might feel a growing disconnect, an unease, with behaviors that everyone around you seems to consider perfectly normal. Things that once felt authentic now feel forced, unnatural. Social gatherings that once energized you now leave you utterly drained, depleted. And the strangest part of all, you can't pinpoint exactly when this shift began. Can you? Eckhart Tolle, the renowned spiritual teacher, reveals that this discomfort, this growing unease, isn't a problem. In fact, it's the first sign, the initial flicker, that you are awakening. Those things that now feel wrong are the social norms, the expectations that were never truly aligned with your authentic self, your core being. They were, essentially, programs installed by society, running automatically in your mind, on a loop. And now, for the first time, you're actually noticing them. Today, I'm going to share 5 social norms, 5 unwritten rules that spiritually awakened people are quietly, subtly, abandoning, not with grand gestures of rebellion, not with anger or resentment, simply with awareness. And as I reveal each one, you might just realize that you've already started letting go of some of them, without even fully understanding why. But here's what makes this different from any other video you've watched on this topic. By the end, you won't just understand what you're leaving behind, you'll understand why. Deep down, your soul chose this exact moment, this pivotal point in your life, to begin this process, and that understanding changes everything. Let's begin with the first social norm that awakened people are abandoning. And it might surprise you, because it's something you were taught, drilled into you since childhood. The first norm is the compulsive need, the relentless craving for external validation, for seeking approval from others. From the moment you were old enough to understand words, you were conditioned, programmed, to seek approval. That's my boy. That's my girl. Smart student, talented employee. Your entire identity, in many ways, was constructed, built brick by brick, from the opinions of others. Eckhart Tolle explains this with crystal clarity. In his groundbreaking book, The Power of Now, he says that the ego, that false sense of self, creates your identity from your social standing, or your job title, your possessions, your level of education, your physical appearance, your relationships, and your personal history. This means that most people walk through life as little more than a collection of external validations, constantly seeking approval. They don't truly know who they are. They only know who others have told them they are. The awakened person begins to notice something strange. The compliment that used to make them feel good for days now feels hollow, empty. The criticism that used to devastate them now seems like someone talking about a character in a movie, distant, unreal. They start to observe these reactions, instead of being consumed by them. This doesn't mean just that awakened people become arrogant or dismissive of others. Quite the opposite. In fact, they become more genuinely present with people, because they're no longer using every interaction as a mirror to see their own worth reflected back. There's a freedom, a liberation, that comes with this shift. That is difficult to adequately describe to those who haven't experienced it. Imagine, just for a moment, walking into a room without the constant background noise of wondering what people think of you. Imagine having a conversation where you are fully listening, truly engaging, instead of preparing your next impressive statement, your clever retort. This is the gift of releasing, of letting go of that compulsive need for external validation. Tolle describes this state as being nobody, not in a diminishing, belittling way, but in a liberating way. When you are nobody, you have nothing to protect, nothing to prove, and paradoxically, this is when your true presence, your authentic self, can finally shine through, without interference, without the ego's constant chatter. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, perhaps even a little triggering. When you stop seeking validation, the people around you notice. They feel that something has changed, that the dynamic has shifted. They might even, subconsciously, try to pull you back into the old pattern by offering excessive praise or excessive criticism. Both are tests, both are invitations to return to the unconscious game, to the old way of being, and this connects to something even deeper, something that Tolle rarely discusses in interviews, perhaps because it's so subtle, but I'll reveal it in a moment. First, you need to understand the second norm that is disappearing from the awakened mind. The second social norm is the pressure, the overwhelming compulsion to fill silence with conversation. Society, from a young age, has trained us to fear silence. A quiet moment between two people is considered awkward, uncomfortable. You must fill it with something. Anything, the weather, sports, gossip, the latest celebrity scandal. Anything to avoid the discomfort of simply being present, together, in the quiet. Tolle teaches that true presence requires no words. In fact, words often take us away from presence. They pull us into the mind, into concepts, into the endless stream of thinking that separates us from the direct experience of now. Awakened people begin to love silence. They discover that real connection, authentic intimacy, happens in the gaps between words. They notice that most conversations are not genuine communication at all. They are ego talking to ego. Masks entertaining masks. New stories reinforcing stories. This shift inevitably creates friction. Friends wonder why you've become so quiet, so withdrawn. Family members think something is wrong, that you're depressed or unwell. Co-workers feel uncomfortable around you. They can't quite put their finger on it. They cannot understand that you're not ignoring them. You're actually more present with them than ever before. You've simply stopped performing, stopped playing the game. Research from transpersonal psychology confirms this experience. Studies on spiritual awakening consistently show that individuals often report feeling alienated, estranged from conventional social norms after their awakening experience. They struggle to communicate what has changed. They feel misunderstood by those who haven't had similar experiences. But the silence isn't empty. Tolle describes it as spacious awareness. It's the background of stillness from which all sounds arise. When you become comfortable with silence, you access a dimension of yourself, a level of awareness. That constant talking, constant mental chatter obscures, hides from you. Now, the third norm, is where things get really interesting. And honestly, this is the one that most people resist understanding until they experience it themselves. Let me explain. The third social norm is the obligation, the societal pressure to pursue conventional success, to chase the American dream. Society has a very specific template for what your life should look like. Get educated, get a good job, get promoted, buy a house, accumulate status, retire, and then, eventually, die. Tolle points out that this template, this prescribed path, is not created for your fulfillment, your happiness, your well-being. It's created to feed the consumer economy, to keep the machine running. In one of his most revealing quotes, he says that what keeps the so-called consumer society going is the fact that trying to find yourself through things, through external achievements, simply doesn't work. The ego satisfaction is short-lived, fleeting. So you buy more, you achieve more, you climb higher up the corporate ladder, and the emptiness, the hollowness, remains. Awakened people start to question this template, this predetermined path, not from laziness, not from a lack of ambition, but from a deep, visceral recognition that the goals, the aspirations, were never truly their own. They were inherited, downloaded from family, culture, and media. They were running programs, written by someone else, designed to benefit someone else. This questioning can be terrifying. Your entire sense of direction, your purpose, was built, constructed on these goals without them. What do you do? Where do you go? Who are you without your ambitions? Many people experience a kind of vertigo, a feeling of being lost. At this stage, the ground they were standing on suddenly disappears. The ladder they were climbing leads nowhere. It's propped up against a false wall. This is not a crisis. It's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. Disguised as a breakdown, it's the moment when the false self runs out of gas and the true self finally gets a chance to emerge. Eckhart Tolle offers a profound answer. You become present. You discover that the future you were chasing doesn't even exist. It's a mental construct. All that exists is this moment. And in this moment, you can act from presence, rather than from ego-driven goals. This doesn't mean awakened people stop working or achieving. The opposite often happens. They become more effective because they're no longer wasting energy on internal conflict. They're no longer divided between who they are and who they think they should be. But society just doesn't get it. Family members worry. Friends express concern. Everyone wants to know, what happened to your ambition? They can't see that your ambition, hasn't disappeared. It's simply transformed from ego-driven striving to presence-based action. Remember when I mentioned that seeking approvals connects to something deeper? Here it is. The fourth norm reveals why so many of these patterns exist in the first place. And understanding this changes your relationship with everyone in your life. The fourth social norm is the compulsion to defend your beliefs and opinions. The ego doesn't just create identity from seeking approval. It also creates identity from being right. Your opinions become who you are. Your beliefs become your fortress, and any challenge to them feels like an attack on your very existence. Tolle explains this with striking clarity. He says that the egoic sense of self needs conflict because its sense of separate identity gets strengthened in fighting against this or that. The ego lives through comparison. It feeds on being right, while others, you are wrong. Watch any social media argument, watch any family debate about politics or religion. You'll see egos at war, each one fighting, not for truth, but for survival. Being wrong isn't just uncomfortable. To the ego, it feels like death. Awakened people notice something interesting. They can hold an opinion without being attached to it. They can listen to opposing views without feeling threatened. They can even change their mind without feeling like they've lost something. This flexibility terrifies the ego. It tries to pull you back into righteous anger. It whispers that some beliefs are too important to release. And yes, you can still have values. You can still stand for what matters, but you do it from presence, not from ego defense. The practical impact is remarkable. Conversations become actual exchanges of ideas rather than battles for dominance. Relationships deepen because you're no longer keeping score. Disagreements resolve faster because neither party is fighting for their identity's survival. But there's one more norm to discuss, and this final one might be the most difficult to hear. It touches something that society considers sacred. It challenges a duty that was instilled before you could question it. The fifth social norm is the obligation to maintain toxic relationships out of loyalty. Blood is thicker than water. Friends are forever. Family comes first. These phrases are embedded so deeply that questioning them feels like betrayal. Tolle addresses this directly when he talks about the pain body. The collective pain of generations can be passed through families. Dysfunctional pattern repeat across decades, and society tells you to accept this, to tolerate it, to call it love. Awakened people begin to see clearly. They recognize that some relationships are not based on genuine connection. They're based on shared pain, on mutual dysfunction, on obligations that drain life force rather than enhance it. This does not mean cutting everyone off. It means becoming conscious of what each relationship actually is. Some family bonds are genuine love. Others are trauma bonds disguised as duty. Some friendships nurture growth. Others keep you small because your expansion threatens their comfort. Tolle speaks about this with compassion. He never advocates abandonment. What he teaches is discernment, the ability to be present in a relationship while recognizing its nature. Sometimes presence itself transforms the relationship. The other person feels your stillness, and it awakens something in them. So other times, presence reveals that the relationship cannot survive your awakening. Both outcomes are valid. Both serve the evolution of consciousness. Research on post-awakening integration confirms this pattern. Studies show that awakened individuals often go through a period of social withdrawal. They naturally distance from relationships that no longer resonate. This can be painful, but it's also a purification process. The key is not to make dramatic exits or deliver speeches about awakening. The key is to simply become present in each interaction. Presence reveals truth, and truth naturally reorganizes relationships without force. Now, I want to connect all 5 norms back to a single principle that Tolle emphasizes throughout his teaching, because understanding this principle makes the entire transition easier. All 5 norms share one common root. They're all ways the ego maintains its sense of separate self. Seeking approval keeps you looking outside for who you are. Constant talking prevents you from encountering the silence where presence lives. Chasing the American dream gives the ego future goals to pursue. Defending beliefs gives the ego something to protect. Maintaining toxic relationships gives the ego familiar patterns to repeat. When you see this clearly, something shifts. You realize that abandoning these norms isn't about becoming a different person. It's about uncovering the person you always were beneath the conditioning. Tolle calls this the deep I, the timeless being that exists before thoughts, before identity, before all the stories you've been told about yourself. But here's what most spiritual teachers won't tell you directly. This process is not always peaceful. As research on spiritual awakening confirms, the experience initiates a complex psychological and existential process. It requires intentional and continuous integration. It's not an endpoint. It's the beginning of an ongoing transformation. You might experience periods where you feel worse before you feel better. Tolle himself went through what he describes as a year of sitting on park benches in a state that most people would call depression. But he was not depressed. He was dissolving. The false self was dying, and the true self was emerging. This is why I want you to understand something important right now. If you're in the middle of this process and it feels difficult, you're not doing it wrong. You're doing it exactly right. The discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of transformation. Think about what a caterpillar goes through to become a butterfly. Inside that cocoon, it's not a gentle rearrangement, it's complete dissolution. Everything the caterpillar was must break down before the butterfly can emerge. Your old identity is doing the same thing. The norms that held it together are dissolving and something new is being born. Let me share something that will help you navigate this transition. It's a practice that Eckhart Tolle rarely teaches publicly, but it's embedded throughout his work. Instead of trying to force yourself to abandon these norms, simply observe them in action. When you catch yourself seeking approval, and do not judge it, simply notice, oh, the mind is looking for approval again. When you fill silence with nervous chatter, observe it. Interesting. The ego is uncomfortable with stillness. When you feel the pull of the American dream, watch it. The mind is measuring worth against external standards. This observation is not passive. It's profoundly active. It's the birth of presence. Because the moment you observe a pattern, you are no longer completely identified with it. There is now a space between you and the pattern, and in that space, transformation happens automatically. Tolle describes this beautifully. He says that only presence can free you of the ego, and you can only be present now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. The conditioned patterns have their momentum. They will not disappear overnight, but as awareness grows, they diminish. They get transmuted. This brings us to a crucial point about what happens after these norms begin to fall away. And honestly, this is where the real work begins. You've just discovered something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The social norms that feel uncomfortable are programs that were never truly yours. You are awakening to the truth that you've been running on borrowed software. This is exactly the kind of insight that changes lives. Not everyone gets to hear this. Not everyone is ready. But you watched this far because something in you resonated. Something in you already knew. I create these videos because I believe this understanding needs to spread. The world is full of people suffering from ego-driven patterns. They never chose. They chase goals that leave them empty. They defend positions that cage them. They maintain relationships that drain them. And they think this is just how life is. When you click super thanks below this video, you become part of something larger than yourself. You're not just supporting a channel. You're voting for a different kind of content. You're saying that presence matters and that awakening is real, that there's another way to live. This is not about payment. This is about participation. In the collective awakening that Tolle writes about in The Power of Now, every person who wakes up makes it easier for others to follow. Every contribution to spreading this message creates ripples you cannot see. Now let me give you something practical. to take away from this video. Because understanding without application is just entertainment, and you came here for transformation. Here's a practice you can start today, for the next 7 days. Pick one of the 5 norms we discussed, just one, and commit to observing it, without trying to change it. If you choose seeking approval, simply notice every time you look to others for validation. Notice how it feels. When you get it, notice how it feels. When you do not judge. Do not resist. Just watch. If you choose silence avoidance, notice every time you speak, just to fill a gap. Notice the discomfort that precedes the words. Notice what happens, Yodi, if you let the silence exist for one extra breath. If you choose the American dream, notice every time you measure your worth against external metrics. Notice whose voice is doing the measuring. Was it yours, or was it installed by someone else? If you choose belief defense, notice every time you feel the urge to be right. Notice the physical sensation that accompanies it. Notice how the ego contracts when challenged. If you choose toxic loyalty, notice which relationships leave you depleted and which leave you energized. Notice which ones require you to be less than you are. Notice without acting. The action will come naturally. This observation practice, Eckhart, is deceptively simple. The ego will want to skip it. The ego will say, "You already understand." The ego will suggest more advanced techniques. Ignore it. The most advanced technique in spiritual development is simple awareness. Let me tell you what happens after you do this practice consistently. First, you'll be surprised by how often these patterns run. You thought you were aware. You'll discover you were barely scratching the surface. Second, the patterns will start to lose their grip, not because you fought them, but because you illuminated them. Darkness cannot survive direct observation. Unconscious patterns cannot survive conscious awareness. Third, space will appear in your life. Time you used to spend seeking approval will be recovered. Energy you used to spend defending beliefs, Eckhart, will be freed. Relationships that drained you will naturally reorganize or complete. Fourth, and this is what Tolle emphasizes most, you will encounter yourself, not the self you were told you are, not the self that needs approval, success, rightness, or toxic loyalty. The self that exists before all conditions. The presence that needs nothing, because it is everything. This is not spiritual philosophy. This is practical transformation. Every awakened person who has walked this planet has gone through some version of this process. They questioned the norms. They observed the pattern. They discovered who they were beneath the conditioning. You are doing the same thing as right now. Watching this video is not passive consumption, it's active participation in your own awakening. Something in you drew you here. Something in you recognized these truths. That something is your deeper nature, calling you home. Let me address a question that might be arising in your mind. You might be wondering if abandoning these norms will make you strange, antisocial, or unable to function in regular life. Here's the paradox that Tolle points to repeatedly. The more present you become, the more effective you are in the world, not less. The awakened state is not escapism. It's enhanced engagement. You stop wasting energy on ego games and start directing it toward what actually matters. Think about the most genuinely compassionate people you've ever met, the ones who made you feel truly seen and heard. Were they seeking approval? Were they filling every silence with chatter? Were they obsessed with the American dream? Were they constantly defending their opinions? Were they trapped in toxic relationships and out of duty? No. They were present. They were free. from the norms that bind most people. And that freedom, that authenticity, made them extraordinary to be around. This is your potential, not to become someone you're not, but to become who you've always been. Beneath all those layers of social conditioning, those old programs running in your mind, the norms are falling away, not because you're failing at life. They're falling away because you're succeeding at awakening. You're shaking off the masks. Now I want to hear from you. This video covered 5 social norms, but I know there are more. I know that some of you have already abandoned patterns that I didn't even mention. Others are struggling with norms that seem impossible to release. They feel trapped. Here's my question. Which of these 5 norms resonates most with your current experience? Are you still caught in the seeking approval loop? Is the silence still uncomfortable? Are you chasing the American dream, even though you know it's not your dream? Are you exhausted from defending your beliefs online? Are you drained by relationships that take more than they give? Drop your answer in the comments below. Be specific. Be honest. The ego will want to give a vague answer, or no answer at all. It'll want to observe without participating. But participation accelerates awakening. When you name your pattern publicly, you create accountability. When you share your experience, you help others recognize theirs. This comment section can become a space for collective recognition, a place where awakened people find each other, a reminder that you are not alone in this process. You are part of something larger. I read every comment. In the first 2 hours after posting, I respond to the ones that show genuine engagement with the material. So don't just watch and scroll, participate in your own awakening. And if you're new to this channel, subscribe and enable notifications. This isn't just another spiritual content channel. This is a space dedicated to the kind of direct, practical teaching that Tolle himself emphasizes. Think of the power of now. No fluff, no spiritual bypassing, just presence. Meeting presence through these words. Remember what we discovered today. The social norms that feel wrong aren't your failure. They're your awakening. The discomfort you feel isn't a problem to solve. It's a transition to honor. And the 5 norms we discussed are just the beginning. As presence deepens, more conditioning will reveal itself. Each revelation is an opportunity for freedom, a chance to shed another layer. You're not becoming a different person. You're becoming yourself. And that is the most powerful transformation any human can undergo. Until next time, practice observation without judgment. Let the norms reveal themselves, and trust that the presence you're uncovering is exactly what this world needs more of. It needs you.